Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome back, focused learners, to today's explainer. We've got a truly fascinating, deeply philosophical text to unpack today. It was written by Xu Feng back in March 2013, and it's got a pretty bold title. It is Ego That Blocks Our Way to Heaven. Now you might be wondering, what kind of ego are we talking about here? Well, the author explores the ego not just as some everyday psychological quirk, but as the literal, fundamental barrier to human peace, environmental harmony, and spiritual elevation. The text gives us a very specific framework for diagnosing human suffering, and then it offers a radical cure.
Here is a quick roadmap of exactly what we're going to cover today. 1. The root of all pain. 2. A universal spiritual consensus. 3. A real-world example. 4. 8 steps to selflessness. And 5. Realizing your true self.
Section 1. The root of all pain. Understanding the core problem.
So the crucial point is that every great philosophical framework has to start by pinpointing the main hurdle to human happiness, right? Actually, scratch that. It's not just a hurdle here. The text explicitly defines the ego as the precipice and the stumbling block preventing people from reaching heaven. It's labeled as the absolute root of all trouble, pain, and misfortune that inevitably drags a person down to a lower space of life. We aren't just talking about someone being a little bit too prideful or boastful at a dinner party. The author defines the ego in the strictest possible sense as the ultimate enemy of peace. It's the unyielding wall between us and a higher state of existence.
And the text maps out exactly how this plays out in the real world. It's like a giant, destructive feedback loop. Step 1, the ego drives a person towards selfishness. Step 2, that selfishness inevitably brings harm and pain to others, to society, and crucially, to nature itself. Step 3, all of that harm and pain reflects right back onto the self. And finally, step 4, this creates a vicious cycle leading straight to eventual destruction. It's a pretty stark warning. The author is saying that personal selfishness doesn't just stay personal, it actively tears down our environment and our communities, taking all of us down with it.
Section 2. A universal spiritual consensus. The sage's wisdom.
To back this up, the text builds its argument by showing how radically different world philosophies actually agree on this exact issue. First up, we have the teachings of the gods. The text states, "The teachings of gods are that by abandoning the ego, one will receive life and peace." So, according to the source material, the divine promise is incredibly straightforward here. Dropping your ego is the direct, non-negotiable prerequisite for gaining true life and lasting peace.
Let's move to and see how this builds with our second teaching. The author writes, "The teachings of the Buddha are that by being free of ego, form, and worry, one can enter the Elysium world." Here, the text points out that Buddhist tradition similarly identifies the shedding of the ego, along with letting go of physical forms and worldly anxieties, as the necessary key to entering a state of ultimate bliss.
Now, the third perspective comes from celestial beings. Their teaching, as quoted in the text, is to take things as they are, follow your own nature and be unrestrained, follow your destiny and be carefree. You know, the author uses this to illustrate a philosophy of total surrender. It's all about moving smoothly through the world, acting in total accordance with nature, and completely removing that exhausting friction that an inflated ego constantly generates. And to wrap up this historical framework, we have the teachings of saints. The text describes saints as those who lack the hearts of egos, but to take the hearts of the world as their own. Instead of looking at life through a tiny, self-serving lens, the saintly approach literally absorbs the needs and feelings of humanity. Their identity completely merges with the collective. So, when we pull all 4 of these historical perspectives together, we hit the text's ultimate conclusion, the shared core. Whether we're talking about the gods, the Buddha, celestial beings, or saints, the absolute, universal requirement is this: you must be free from ego. Free from ego to enjoy the true pleasures of life. Free from ego to enter paradise, the Pure Land, or the fairyland. The author uses this exact concept, being absolutely free from ego, as the ultimate anchor point binding all this major spiritual wisdom together into one single truth.
Section 3. A real-world example, contrasting lifestyles.
Now, ancient theory is great and all, but the author actually transitions from that into a modern observational case study, and this brilliantly illustrates the core argument of the text. On the one side, the author observes traditional marriages and families, arguing that they're fundamentally bound by ego and inherently designed to serve the self, which, he observes, leads them to be less happy and less free. On the flip side, the author contrasts this with a community model called the New Oasis for Life.
The text claims that people living there are freer from ego, deeply selfless, and therefore measurably more joyous, happy, and free. The author is simply presenting his observational data here. Letting go of the ego in community living produces drastically happier results. Which naturally brings us to the biggest cliffhanger of the whole text. So how in the world can we actually free ourselves from our egos? If the ego is the absolute root of all our pain and selflessness is the golden ticket to paradise, how do we practically get there? It's time to shift gears from philosophy straight into actionable application.
Section 4. 8 Steps to Selflessness, the Practical Application.
Okay, this is where the text gives us a literal checklist, a highly specific, step-by-step methodology designed to completely dismantle the ego. Here are the 8 steps. 1. Live according to the law of nature. 2. Follow the unified teachings of Jesus, Buddha, and Lao Tzu. 3. Completely abandon your ego and integrate into nature. 4. Desire nothing, taking things exactly as they are. 5. Own nothing or no one. 6. Do not interfere with, control, or try to change others. 7. Do not analyze or judge others. And 8. Seek out and listen strictly to the selfless and humble. I mean, think about it. Just trying not to judge anyone on a random Tuesday is tough enough, let alone owning absolutely nothing. But this rigorous path is prescribed by the text to strip away every last layer of personal control.
Section 5. Realizing your true self. Permaculture and peace.
So let's say a society actually pulls this off and follows those 8 intense steps. What's the promised reward? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the author beautifully connects spiritual selflessness right back to physical, environmental harmony. The text highlights permaculture agriculture, a state where humanity harmonizes so perfectly with the law of nature that the wind and rain come exactly in their proper time. Because we've entirely dropped our selfish egos, this ultimate balance allows for completely carefree lives, total peace, and perfect health for everyone. It's a vision where we stop fighting nature and finally become a thriving part of it.
We are going to wrap up today's explainer with this incredibly powerful paradox straight from the text. Only selflessness helps one realize their self. Only freedom from ego helps one achieve their self. The author is making the case that the only way to truly find out who you are is to stop fiercely focusing on yourself. It's wild, right? According to the text, those 2 sentences hold the absolute secret to a brilliant life, and it leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on. In our relentless modern hustle to build ourselves up, are we actually just blocking our own way to true peace? Thank you so much for joining me as we explored this perspective today. Take some time to really think on that, and we will see you next time.